So we'll get our meeting started. We'll start with the pledge to the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, good evening, everybody, and especially to our students here. Thank you for your patience in waiting for us. The first item on our agenda is communications from the public and press. Do I see anyone from either the media or from the public here? I don't think so, that would like to address the board. Seeing no one, we'll move on to our next item, and it's labeled board correspondence, but as is normally the case, we don't have any board correspondence. But we did start what I hope is going to be something of a tradition last month by taking a little bit of time to recognize some of the all-star, in last month's case, students, this month's case, students. We could also do programs, staff, faculty, any number of different groups that have done something to distinguish themselves and to give them some well-earned recognition. Tonight, I'd like Mr. Burke to kind of walk us through some recognition for some of the students that have taken part in area All-State or even more competitions. Mr. Burke?
So in just a couple of moments, we'll be handing out certificates to some of the finest musicians in what is truly the best music program, I think, in the North Country. Every once in a while, Mr. Oliver will introduce our choral or our concerts and say that he'll mistakenly say it's one of the best, and then he corrects himself and says it is the best, and he's darn right, it is the best. And we have some of the best of that group here tonight. These students earned an opportunity to participate with the Area All-State, which I learned is really quite the honor because they have to get judged by an outside independent evaluator and score high enough to make that competition. And so again, extraordinarily proud of these individuals. There are 13 that are going to be recognized with a certificate. And on behalf of the administration, just to know how absolutely proud we are of you and what you do for our district and representing us so incredibly well. It's not just talent, it's everything else that you bring to the table. So very, very well done, and I'm happy to have you folks here tonight. And I'd ask Mr. Haggett if he'd be willing to help hand out the certificates.
Want me to take the certificates?
Please.
All right.
First, we have Leah Morgan, choral. Congratulations. Adele Labarge, choral. Thank you, Adele. Devin Butterfield, choral. Emma Gushloff, choral. Jordan Dubray, choral. From the band, Rory Sidney. Rory's not here. Mr. Lincoln will make sure that Rory gets first certificate. Gabriel Gilbert. Thank you. Congratulations. Nicholas Gilbert. Aiden Devon. Here. Sadie Fenn. Zachary Johnson. Alexander Cachetti. say just one more? Sure. So as long as we're talking about music, we have representatives of the Massena Music Friends here, and they are also to be congratulated. So it's so interesting, right, and so impressive. Not only are they here to support concerts and raise funds, but they're here also to, as we recognize our students. So again, what incredible support. And I think that goes part and parcel for why our music program is so incredibly strong. So thank you to our Massena Music Friends as well.
Thank you, Mr. Burke, and thanks to all of you for being here. This is certainly a pleasure to recognize individual and group achievements like this. And don't feel like you need to stick around. However, if you'd like to see democracy in action, feel free to stick around. Moving on. Well, see you later. Moving on in our agenda, we'll move on to information and reports, and we'll start with Isabel with our student ex officio report.
There's not much I have to report this month, just a couple of giving back things that our students and faculty are doing for the holiday season. The chorus department actually went caroling at the elementary schools today. Student council did a gift give back to the pre-Ks at Madison School yesterday, and they were all very happy to get some presents. And there's going to be a give back to the bus drivers at the bus garage with a Tim Hortons breakfast for all of them. From actually Mrs. Miniga's creative writing class came up with a give back opportunity for a project. And that is all I have this month.
Thanks very much, Isabel. And we'll move on now to the Facilities Committee report and Trustee LeBlanc.
So the Facilities Committee met at Madison on November 25th. We had the regular crew and we had some guests, Nicole Terminelli, Anna Anichuk, and Phil Squadimito from King. We talked about the capital project with Phil. We discussed the maximum cost allowance per school, and we realized that the high school, we're going to have a big challenge to decide what's going to make it, because we have a lot of projects to go, like the pool, the HVAC, the turf, the girls' locker room, the roof, the bathrooms, the kitchen, the gym entrance, special ed space, and all that. Those are all competing priorities, and we have a limited amount of money, as we're going to explain later with Ron. And we also will need to plan the have 5-year plans for the rest of the schools, because we have a certain amount of money for each school each year. We talked about the HVAC project, but we didn't have an engineer, so next meeting we should have a King engineer to talk more about our options. We talked about leasing vehicles instead of owning the vehicles. We have 8 vehicles, and we're looking at leasing for the future. We are spent some time talking about undercoating the tractors and dump trailer because of the rust in the North Country. And we did not tour Madison. Nothing was reported. There was teachers' night that evening, so after a few hours we lifted the meeting. We were supposed to meet earlier this week, but we didn't have enough materials, so we're going to meet next month, January 27th at 5 o'clock at the junior high. Thank you.
I have a question. In terms of leasing vehicles, are we talking about sort of the short-term future for that, or is I guess my impression is that we basically own all of our vehicles outright, or are we financing some of them?
No, currently we own all of our vehicles.
Okay.
One of the things that we're looking at is, are we keeping our vehicles too long, and what is that cost of ownership? So a number of schools, BOCES, have switched over to a lease program through Enterprise, and we've been exploring that. So for example, next year, one of the things that we'd be looking at as pretty high priority needs would be 2 new vans, as well as at least 1 new passenger vehicle. Last year we purchased 2 Traverses. One was really supposed to be for staff going to conferences. They've both been occupied by transportation. So if we just talk about 3 new vehicles, we're well over $100,000, and that still doesn't address some of our other needs with a plow truck that's starting to fall apart. Another truck that we have replaced the transmission, I think now around the 3rd transmission in the past year. So basically what we're looking at is a lease program where it'd be around, I think it's around a $70,000 cost for the first year. And what we would be doing is we'd be able to circulate those in and out. Enterprise actually watches the market, so after a year or 2 years, they're watching your mileage. They'll make that recommendation that now's the time to get rid of the vehicle. It has a high trade-in value, and that's when you would do that. So you'd be making those moves pretty consistently. Locally, St. Lawrence County, I believe the Village of Massena, St. Lawrence Lewis Boces, and I believe there's at least one other school locally within our region that are using Enterprise to manage their fleets and to do this vehicle purchase. It looks like it's a good, promising program, but we'll have much more detail for the board considering throughout the budget process.
Okay, thank you.
Was King and King supposed to be at that meeting? The way you worded it, it sounded like they were supposed to be there and they weren't.
Stan was there, but the engineer, I thought he was going to be there, but he wasn't.
Yeah, the engineer wasn't, I wasn't under the impression that the engineer would be there, and we ended up with HVAC questions.
Okay.
And we'll talk probably a little more about that with the maximum cost allowance.
Okay.
Any other questions for Robert? All right, we'll move on now to the Policy Committee report, and Trustee Monroe.
Okay, before I go over our November Policy Committee meeting, I just want to advise everyone, if you haven't noticed yet, we are a month behind in our policy meeting minutes. There's a clerical error on my end in getting the meeting minutes to Ashley in time, and we wanted to make sure that board members had ample time to review the meeting notes before the meeting. And unfortunately, last month that wasn't going to be able to happen. So we're a month behind right now. We did meet this month also, so those meeting minutes will be on the January agenda, and we'll see what we can do to get those caught up. But as far as our meeting November 12th, we reviewed a number of policies in the 3000 series and one in the 7000. The first one was 7131, and we recommend rescinding the current policy and a need to discuss the creation of a new policy. That's for non-resident students. Mr. Burke had recommended that we also take a look at the Canton Central School District policy and see what they're doing and see if we can, instead of reinventing the wheel, look at their policy as a solution to our policy as well. In the 3000 series, the review-only updates were for 3261, 3262, solicitation of students, and then advertising. So those were review, no updates. 3263 also review, solicitations of personnel. 3270 we recommend rescinding as it's an exact duplication of 3280 in terms of the wording. 3275 nominating and recognition of community honorees, that was also review, no updates to that policy, as well as 3280, that was the duplicate policy that we recommend keeping. 3310 we reviewed public access to records, and we recommend one change that was just grammatical. 3320, confidentiality of computerized information. We reviewed this policy, and we did have a few questions regarding access by employees of the district, especially those in the IT department. And there was some discussion about certain information and need to access it, and need to access it with superintendent approval, if that's something we might see fit. And then we also recommended adding a reference note to the existing technology and IT policy as well. 3410, Code of Conduct on School Property. We recommend replacing the current policy with the recommended Erie 1 updates, which includes a section on privacy rights. 3411, unlawful possession of a weapon on school grounds. Review only, no updates to that policy. 3421, Title IX, sex discrimination. Again, updated version with Erie updates and legal changes. And I have my notes here that page 7, the first paragraph was the grammatical. The word tardy should be timely in that policy. 3510, emergency closings, review only, no updates to that policy. And 3520, extraordinary circumstances. So we recommend rescinding that policy, as that policy was the basis of a COVID forum policy. But also we decided in the event of a need to look at this policy, we would pretty much already be adhering to regulation by some type of state of emergency action or whatever the case may be. So no need for that policy. Recommend rescinding that one. And then kind of the last discussion out of this November Policy Committee meeting was discussions that we have engaged in before about our electronic device use policy, Policy 7316. And we recommended having some further discussion about that. And so some of the conversation that came out of that electronic device policy discussion was that we kind of need more information, right? We're kind of looking to see what some of the issues are surrounding it. Is it, our cell phones sometimes, are they being used as educational tools in the classroom by some teachers, or are they becoming also distractions in between school periods? Are students leaving the classroom to go to the bathroom a number of times during the day to be able to use their cell phones and get away without getting caught? And then, so a really good point that Mr. Burke also brought up is that a lot of the cell phone related issues that he handles are from cell phone use outside of school. So issues that stem from social media use or whatever the case may be, it's not during the school day hours, it's more or less the major behavioral issues that he has to deal with on the superintendent level. So those were some of the discussions we had, and then we kind of recommended taking a second look at the policy we have in place, which is we feel is pretty clear about the use, but also talking about the handling and observations with phones within our schools. So that's kind of where that conversation went. And that is everything from the November Policy Committee meeting.
Any questions for Zach? If not, I have a comment and I guess a request of the Policy Committee. During that November Policy Committee meeting, Zach, how much discussion was there of 3275 having to do with nomination and recognition of community honorees? Do you recall?
I don't think there was much.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
This policy has always bothered me. I think we passed it in 2019, and I never liked the thresholds that were set. This falls under the naming of school facilities. And it reads, in rare circumstances where the honoree's contributions to the district have been at a level of significance that warrants greater recognition, et cetera, there's a process by which a facility can be named for that person, a part of a facility, a building, something of more significance than, say, a bench or a tree. And in part, the requirements are a petition of a minimum of 1,000 signatures and a minimum of 100 letters of support. I've always felt that that was just too high of a bar, and I would like to request the Policy Committee take another look at that and see if that couldn't be modified. I would think that 500 signatures and 50 letters of support would be sufficient and might be less daunting than doubling of that. We still have a 45-day comment period. The board still has wide discretion for deciding whether the naming should be done or not. I just think that initial 1,000 signatures and 100, full-fledged letters of support is just a very, very high bar that could potentially get in the way of someone who might deserve to be honored by the naming of a facility to just not let that happen.
I have a differing opinion on that, and I look at those thresholds as, if it's that important to the public, that's the reason for that threshold to impress upon us the importance of it, that they've met that threshold. I feel as though if you lower the threshold, and I know you mentioned that we have the latitude, but I think that threshold protects us from being the last decision maker on it in some regards, because if it gets to that threshold, we should be more, we obviously most likely would support it.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing about the whole process, and I was around when that was being kicked around, because I think it started in facilities before it got to policy.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to limit that amount of change and that amount of those sorts of things from being very easy. It means more, but because it becomes difficult to keep track of all of the different things and the recognitions that people can get. It becomes a burden on the district to maintain some of it. So those were some of the reasons we kicked around for why we hit those thresholds. I don't remember, Pat would have been here when that was going on. I don't remember I'm sure he did a lot of research,
Yeah,
knowing
that
Pat.
was
and-
the reason. I was there on the facility. We
Yeah.
discussed it a few times on the facilities committee, and I remember discussing it all.
Yeah, I'm sure Pat did research and found benchmarks at other places, I would guess. But I mean, that's my perspective on it. I understand your perspective, but if you look at it the other way, if it's really important to them, they will get through that. It's not to bar anyone or anything like that, but that's what I remember from it back in its inception. So
Well said, that that way we don't lose control of that. If we wanted to do something, name something, we could always initiate it, but if it comes from the public, at least we're not the last one that being imposed something, so that's why the threshold is
Yeah.
so high.
well, I mean, it's
I would still like to make a request that the policy committee just bat that around.
All right.
And if if that's the way the policy committee feels about it, I can live with that. But I'd like to have another, to use a Kevin term, another bite at that apple.
Okay, Paul, so if I heard you correctly, you're asking for us to review a potential reduction in the number of signatures required supporting a plan?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Take notes.
And there's nothing, since this is a review-only policy, there's nothing saying that we can't approve the action tonight and just take another look at it.
Sure.
A month or two down the road.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the policy notes for November? Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much, Zach. Turning now to my report. I've already said way too much, but that's the way it is. Under my report, Ron and I had the pleasure of attending the winter conference of the Rural Schools Association on December 4th and 5th in Saratoga Springs. I'm guessing maybe 300 or a little more folks in attendance there. There were lots of board members, superintendents, building leaders, other district personnel. The conference was opened by the executive director of RSA, Dave Little. He is actually a former school board president. He has been director of RSA for 10 years, former New York State Assemblyman. If you've read any of his writings, during budget time, last year he was very, very active in writing and speaking about the problems with taking away of foundation aid and that kind of thing. He's just a terrific writer, speaker, and advocate for rural schools. sort of first up on the business end was we had a session that talked about key issues with the commissioner and 3 of her deputy commissioners. They discussed, among other things, the highlights of the Rockefeller Institute report on foundation aid that had just been released. They also touched on the Blue Ribbon Commission on graduation standards, regionalization initiative, and ways the department's looking at easing school staff shortages. As always, there were really not a lot of details, but and there was not a lot in the way of interaction or question and answer with the commissioners panel. That's kind of what you get when you go and listen to the commissioner. To me, the most anticipated session was a more detailed presentation on the Rockefeller Institute study that was given by the 2 primary authors, Robert Megna and Brian Backstrom. And in the broadest sense, what I took away is that the report is just a report. Any changes to be implemented are now in the hands of the state legislature, and there are lots of recommendations for changes in how foundation aid is determined that are interdependent on each other, and there is a lot of concern that the state legislature will kind of cherry pick parts of the report and say, well, okay, we did something, and that what they do may or may not play well politically with their constituencies. But some of the recommendations that I felt like they made the most sense include increasing the unrestricted fund balance maximum to 10%. I think that's something we could all get behind. Making the state fully fund the transition to zero-emission buses. That's certainly a concern. The report also recommended increasing funding for more school-based mental health services. That seems to make some sense. And they also recommend reviewing the foundation aid formula on a regular basis so that we don't end up back where we started. That was like the highlight of day one for me. Do you have anything to add to that, Ron? Anything that jumps out at you?
No, I think you summed it up perfectly.
Okay. The RSA conference differs from things like the NISBA convention or even the summer RSA conference that I attended, in that there really isn't any small group workshops to choose from, and everyone is basically in one big room and we all take part in the same sessions. So day 2 was devoted to some subjects that might normally be part of a smaller workshop at another event. And the one that I took the most away from was a presentation on something called facilitated intensive negotiation. They call it the FIN for short. And it's a collective bargaining strategy, something that I had never heard of. Sort of the high points of it is you set aside 3 full days outside of the school environment to negotiate a new agreement with your bargaining units with the help of a mediator, a Public Employee Relations Board mediator. Normally, a mediator would come in after you've declared an impasse and you can't go any further. But in this strategy, the PERB mediator is there from the very beginning. The district and the union agree ahead of time on the number of and the types of issues that are going to be bargained, and you hammer out the contract in 3 days. So there's obviously a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the essence of it. And the panel that presented that was a lawyer from Ferrara, and a school district superintendent, and a NYSET negotiator. They had really great things to say about it. They had well-prepared PowerPoint slides, talked about how streamlined and cordial the process was. I really found that very, very interesting. It's one of the most interesting educational sessions that I've attended at any conference. Anything to add to that, Ron? You even told me that you've had a little bit of experience with that.
Yeah, from the opposite side of the table, we did this when I was lead negotiator for the teachers in Saranac Lake. We took a whole day, and we did not have a PERB mediator. It was just my team, and then also the board's team, and we hashed it out by lunch. We had a conceptual agreement. We ate lunch, came back, and we had an MOA by around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. We did a lot of these same things without knowing we were doing these same things. We agreed ahead of time that we wanted to give this a shot, and it worked quite well. We tried a little bit of this at Canton a couple of years ago, where the teachers that were on the team were given release time for the day, which creates a major problem. When we don't have a whole lot of subs, to take 8 or 10 teachers out of the classroom it's problematic. But there again, it worked pretty well. We needed a little more time. I think it was maybe 2 or 3 meetings after that in the evening, and we were able to iron out a deal. Again, no PERB, no attorney. So it can work.
I agree. I like the idea too, because when we negotiate contracts, there sometimes takes weeks between meetings, and we lose focus. We come back and we have to remember what was said, the attitude and all that. So I think it's a good idea to explore that or go back to it if you already did it before. So I like the idea.
I just was very, very intrigued by it because I had never heard of this particular method of bargaining. I don't think anyone's saying that we're going to go this direction. That would certainly be have to be something that would have to be agreed to, but I was very intrigued. Anything else you wanted to add, Ron, about just the conference overall?
The only thing I would do is I would just recommend that if you're available for the next RSA conference, it was my first, and quite honestly, it was one of the most impressive conferences I've been to. I think Dave Little put on everything was very timely. It was relevant to what we do. It was just a phenomenal experience over, really less than 48 hours. The venue was great, very inexpensive venue for us, and the quality of the presentations was just remarkable. Also, the board conversations. Paul and I sat with mostly a group from the Erie BOCES board.
Erie 2.
And the conversation level was just out of this world. I got probably more out of just the conversations with those board members than really even the rest of the conference, because we're all on the same page. It was really quite remarkable. So if you do have the time, definitely go to an RSA.
I'd be interested. I went to the NISBA one, and I was not here last month to show my appreciation, but I really appreciate the board sending me there to New York City, and I brought back those bags, something that I did through anyway. So I thought about you guys and hope you appreciate it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to trying to. I heard good things about the rural meetings before, so thank you.
At RSA, it was the Saratoga Springs Convention Center, I think is what it's called. Yeah,
For the winter, yes.
yep, the winter conference is there, yes.
There's 2 of them, one in the spring, one in winter.
There's one in the summer, that was in Lake Placid.
So there's always 2 of them.
Yep, the RSA only started doing, RSA's summer conference was in, I forget the name of the hotel, the fancy hotel outside, or in Cooperstown. But frankly, they've outgrown that venue, so that's why they brought their show this past summer to Lake Placid, at the convention center in Lake Placid. Okay, the last thing that I have is you have on your agenda a link to some proposed norms for the board. I'm hoping for adoption of this list of norms that the board would agree to abide by to give ourselves guardrails for our governance role. And the desirability of having these sort of on the books came to light as I was working on our goal that we established a few months ago to revamp our onboarding process. NYSBA publishes a set of sample board norms, so this is something that is that other boards of education do. And it seemed to me that having these written down would make a great discussion point for one of the sessions with our newly elected board candidates or newly elected board members as part of our onboarding process. To put in black and white what our standards of behavior are in meetings, in interactions with Mr. Burke, in interactions with each other, with the staff, with the public, et cetera. The norms, I sort of massaged them myself and then sent them on to the policy committee because it was kind of in their realm, I felt. So they have been looked at by the policy committee, and so they're, in my mind, they're ready to go. There were some small wording things that we fixed as a result of the pass through the policy committee. But if, as we're looking at them tonight, if you see something that is missing or some wording that you're not that wild about, we can adopt them with some changes. We can spend a little bit more time thinking about them. There's a couple of ways that we can go here. But in addition to making the norms part of the onboarding discussion, I would also propose that they be adopted each July at our reorganizational meeting. So we're saying, okay, this is how we're going to interact with one another, and also incorporated into the Board of Education handbook. So there's a resolution on the agenda to adopt the board norms later on. That's my report. Any questions? Okay, I guess we'll move on then to reports from administration and Mr. Burke.
The first item on my report is a conversation about regionalization, and although not required, I will be asking the board to approve that we continue with the regionalization process. There certainly have been a number of concerns expressed around the state of New York regarding this. One of the first concerns was, is this mandated? The Board of Regents voted unanimously to pass the regulation on an emergency basis, and the first stipulation that they addressed and stipulated to is that any school district has the option of opting out of the regionalization process right from the get-go. However, to do so, a Board of Education would have to authorize the superintendent to notify the department by January 15th in writing. I'm asking again the board to continue to allow me to continue that process. The second question is, as a regionalization process is worked on and a regionalization plan is developed, is a board required to adhere to the things that the regionalization planning group has worked on and has agreed upon? That is not necessarily in statute that I can find. However, we continue to get assurances from the department that we will not be forced to do anything from the regionalization plan, as we should always do. If it's not necessarily in legislation, we should keep paper documents of anything that indicates it. In the New York State School Boards Association on board today, Senior Deputy Commissioner for Education Policy, Jeff Madison, reports And his quote is, "We will not approve a regionalization plan that does not have the sign-off of the local districts that are participating." I have other statements like that. We also have statements from the FAQ that's online from the department that indicate it's optional what we participate in at the end of this plan. I think that this one from Deputy Commissioner Madison is the guarantee that I need, that we're not going to be forced into something, even if 17 other districts agree to it. That this board would have the final authority to say yay or nay. And without that, the department will not approve the plan. But again, I think it's important that, and I am keeping a file of these, so that if we do get to the end of the plan, we can say we went into this in good faith. We expect that the department and that the local regionalization effort would honor what has been put here, so that if this district does not agree, according, through the Board of Education does not agree, we will not be bound to those. I think that's a critical aspect. So I also think that going through the process, I'm not sure what we will come up with that we don't already do or don't already offer as a service, a shared service through our BOCES. But until we go through the process, I guess I won't know. So again, I'm asking the board's consideration to allow that process to continue.
We feel we have more to risk or to lose in that process. We don't know. There's a lot of darkness, but we're going in it slowly, timidly, or precaution.
I would say I will be approaching it very precautionary. If there are elements in the plan that would make sense for our students and for our community, then I would certainly be in support of that and bringing that back to the board.
And we don't know if there's money to help us.
Exactly.
Help them or help the people,
Right.
the region.
And this will be a discussion item later on in the agenda. The second item is we do need to appoint representatives to the New York Power Authority Local Government Task Force, and Trustee Peretta has agreed to be one of those. I would like to also continue that role. We meet fairly regularly to discuss the local agreement, and even though we would have 2 reps, we only get 1 vote. So it would obviously be, what's in the board's best interest as represented by Trustee Peretta. Any questions on that? Okay, if Mr. Lincoln could pull up the capital project financing overview. I'd like to take just a few moments tonight to go through really kind of a basic outline of the financing aspect of the capital project. On the second slide, we have the basics of what a maximum cost allowance is, and there are really 2 components of the maximum cost allowance. The first part is the actual construction costs. Those are our hard costs, and those are things that are really related to a building itself. So anything on the inside of the building, the exterior of the building, the roofs, the windows, the brickwork, those types of things. That is generally the bigger portion of any one of these maximum cost allowances. The incidental cost, that includes the elements that are on the outside of the building, site work. So we might have to put in areas for contractors to park their trailers or to store their bins and their materials. It also includes things that would remain with the district, such as parking lots, sidewalks, and athletic fields. And it also includes our soft costs, which are the engineering costs and the architectural fees. The maximum cost allowance has a 5-year look-back window. So every 5 years it gets reset. And the money doesn't carry over. And so as we'll take a look on the next slide, or in a couple minutes, I'm sorry, we'll talk about how that money, and I don't want to say it gets lost, but it gets reset. The 5-year look back, with our project, we plan on bringing the referendum to the voters in May at the annual budget vote. If approved, we will not be submitting, basically design work will take place throughout the course of much of the 2025-26 school year. We will submit then to SED in the spring of 26. When we submit, that sets the look-back window. So you go 5 years back from the spring of '26, and that's when they look at what have you already spent on your buildings. By the spring of '26, we have almost a complete reset throughout the district. For example, at Jefferson Elementary, our construction cost, or our maximum cost allowance there is about $8.4 million. Our incidentals 1.6, almost 1.7, for a total maximum cost allowance at Jefferson of $10 million. And these are based on building units, student units. So it's based on your census, your population over time. So when we go to Madison, you'll notice a slightly different number. The total maximum cost allowance at Madison is almost 11.5 million. At Nightingale, quite a bit higher at almost $12.2 million. At the junior high, 17.2 million. And as we've been talking about for quite some time now through facilities and at these meetings, the crux of the work really for this capital project, the focus is at the high school, where our total combined maximum cost allowance is right around $45 million. What's important to note on the high school is our construction maximum cost is $36 million. Since our issue with the pipeline about a year ago, I've talked with the board about the need to upgrade and replace our HVAC system here. The initial estimate to replace the HVAC system completely and include air conditioning throughout this building was just over $37 million. It ate up our entire construction cost, maximum cost. Excuse me. So we've been going back to the drawing board. We've been working with our architect and our engineer. In fact, we had a meeting earlier today, and we have some preliminary numbers of scaling that back, still getting the essential work done, making sure that we have a reliable heat system, and air conditioning in some of the major areas, making sure that the air conditioning in the auditorium, the cafeteria, the media center, that those are all upgraded and ready to go, and also including air conditioning in the gymnasium. And again, the preliminary number right now looks to be about $19 million on that, which we'll be sharing out and discussing more with the facilities committee to get their feedback. But I want people to understand why we can't just spend $50 million here at the high school on construction. We have, if we go above the maximum cost allowance, it's no longer aidable. So we really want to make sure that we're maximizing every aidable dollar from the state of New York and limiting the exposure to our local taxpayer. Which is the perfect segue into my last slide, which is our building aid. Currently, our building aid here at Massena is very high at about 97.4%. Please don't think that it means that for every dollar we spend, we're going to get 97 cents back. Not everything, and even the best laid out project, is going to be aidable. There will always be certain elements that we do in a capital project that are going to fully come back on the local taxpayer. So when we look at 97%, in my mind, I'm thinking I would be pleased if we can make that no less than 90%. Again, we know things are not always going to be aidable, but yet necessary. This next number is going to be startling, and I certainly don't want anyone to think that that we're looking at, or the facilities committee is looking at spending every penny of our maximum cost allowance, which is almost $87 million. That's not what we're going to be doing, but we are going to be looking at what are the necessities, what are the things that 7 years from now we wish we had done, and try to fix those things now while we have that money, especially at the elementary schools and the junior high, even though they just came off of some capital project work. If we were to spend the $86 million or $87 million total maximum cost, again, if we had 97% aid, we'd get $84 million of that back, leaving a local taxpayer share, again, around $3 million. In our reserve, we have, I believe, and I should have written this down, is it $14 million on the cap? We have $15 million in our capital reserve. So again, the goal here will be to go to the taxpayers with a project that is 0%, not extravagant, I don't think any of the facilities committee is looking at anything that's extravagant, but really what is necessary, infrastructure-wise, programmatic-wise, that we can afford, and that makes sense. The other part of this, with 5 buildings, plus the cab, plus transportation, managing construction at all of those buildings, as Mr. Peretta probably could attest to with just coming off from 3, it's a management nightmare. We really want to make sure that what we do is something that we can control, that between the facilities committee, especially those that are here every day, that we're able to be on the site, watching what's going on, talking with the construction managers, and if we go too large, it becomes problematic. So again, there's a real balancing act that the facilities committee is going to be working on over the next 2 months to get this project scope where we need to be. It's exciting. It's also, I'd be pulling my hair out. I won't be lying about that, but it is. It's also daunting because we're talking a large sum of money, but we also have a lot of work to do with infrastructure, especially here at the high school. I do want to get a little excitement going. Isabel and I have talked about some of the capital project, and we've talked about the condition of our girls' locker room. That is at the high school. That is a priority of the facilities committee. Repairs to the pool. What that looks like, we're not sure, but it'll certainly look better than having duct tape holding tiles together. We are going to be addressing those issues. The HVAC system here in the high school has to be addressed. We have to have certainly some major upgrades to that. I was really excited talking with the engineers today, and I should probably wait for the facilities, but again, I'm just too excited about it because I thought we had a great meeting. And one of the things we'd like to do is get away from the steam system, the steam plant. And that $19 million includes replacing the 3 steam boilers at the cab, which are currently about 15 years old, replacing those with 3 hot water boilers. So we'd actually be able to transfer our system over to a hot water system. Ideally, the three boilers there would be very similar or exact same models or same manufacturer as what we have at the other 4 buildings. So we have that consistency. So again, it was just very exciting to hear and see some of those things develop. Again, probably not air conditioning the entire facility here at the high school yet, but it would be at least air conditioned ready for the next capital project. So again, I think we made great progress with our engineer. And my excitement was only overshadowed by Mr. Tessier's excitement because it's a very meat and potato type system. Not a lot of technology involved, which means less future maintenance, hopefully, as well. So, so again, it was a pretty exciting meeting today, and again, looking forward to the next couple of months. Any questions about school financing on the capital project? Okay. Next item is we have a crossing guard agreement with the village of, I'm sorry, let me go back up. School budget calendar. I would like to call the board's attention to that calendar, and one kind of unusual item there is that in March, if I can find my calendar, we are asking for a second special Board of Education meeting to approve the board's, or to approve our district budget. The rationale for that is, I did have it. Yes, could I please? Sorry, my computer's dead. So on March 26th, which is our regularly scheduled board meeting, that's that special Tuesday meeting where the board is required to vote on the BOCES budget and the BOCES board members. The issue with that date is on Monday the 25th, Mallory and I have to certify our school property tax report card. That's a statutory requirement. In order to do that, the Board of Education has to have approved and passed the budget for voter approval. If we don't have a special board meeting on March 20th, that would then indicate that we would be approving a budget sometime in February. Frankly, I need more time. We need more time with the governor's numbers. We need to see how the conversations are going between the 3 people in a room in Albany, where those discussions are leading, what things are we hearing, so we can modify our budget as needed. It's really the gift of time that we're asking for by about 3 extra weeks. So again, asking for that meeting on March 20th for the, am I saying the right number? Yes. Yeah, to prepare that budget, to have that budget approved. Any questions on the budget calendar? The regular. Am I in the wrong month? Good Lord. Okay. It's only Christmas time. I'm already on the wrong month. Sorry, it's April 28th is when we have to certify. April 29th is the Board of Ed meeting. And asking, thank you, Paul, for the April 14th meeting. Again, gift of time. Sorry. Wrong month, but still gift of time. Thank you.
So we'd be doing the special board meeting on April 14th.
Yes.
And then turning around and meeting again on the 29th because we have to vote on the BOCES budget.
That's correct. And that's also sandwiched in between there is spring break.
Everybody clear on that?
Yes.
I think we're good.
Okay, good, thank you. Thanks for going through that with me. The next item is a crossing guard agreement. We have 6 crossing guards. The Village of Massena pays for 3 of those. We've had an agreement for about a year now. I think last year may have been the first year of that agreement, where we subsidize or we reimburse the village for the other 3. That contract actually expired last June, so the village is asking to update that, and they're asking for approximately $1,300 more to cover the additional cost, just the increase of their cost. Any questions on the crossing guard contract? Okay, surplus items. I'm asking that the board declare 3 Chromebooks surplus. At the last meeting, the Artists Association asked for a donation of Chromebooks. We actually have a number of Chromebooks that are old that we leave on the shelf as a just in case, and just in case students need them at home for medical reasons or for whatever purpose. We have a number of those. They are near the end of life. They're close to being obsolete, and we can certainly afford to give those. And it would be in accordance with our district policy because the Artists Association does benefit our students through their programs. And that's, as I indicated, that's what they'd be using the Chromebooks for. We also have donations from the Back the Pack to the 3 elementary schools to the tune of $270 each, which would be allocated to the grade 6 field trip. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burke. We'll move on now to recommended actions, and first up is all of the items that make up the consent agenda. Are there any consent agenda items that board members would like to have removed for individual action? Okay, hearing no requests, I would ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? Consent agenda carries. Moving on to other items for action. First up is approval of the proposed board norms.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or questions?
Yes, I have some.
Sure.
Okay, so some of the wording is not really my favorite, and so I'm just going to address a couple of them that just, I don't know, seemed weird. The last bullet in communication norms. says, allow the president to speak on behalf of the board and the superintendent to speak on behalf of the district. And I feel like you need to add something like, the president of the board can speak on behalf of the board, but for agreed to agenda items. Like, if we've come to a consensus and we've discussed something and we voted on it, I have no problem with the board president presenting it as the whole board approves. But the way that it's written, it looks like the board president is speaking for the board, no matter where they are or what they're doing. And it just doesn't seem like, that struck me weird. And then, meeting norms. The first bullet says adequately prepare for meetings ahead of time and arrive on time, ready to do the work of the district. I think it's a little strong. I think that we are all, even though we're elected officials, we're not paid officials, and we all have families and things that we do. And I think it should be a little softer. I think maybe if it said, to the best of your ability, endeavor to adequately prepare, et cetera, because stuff happens, and, you know, there are a lot of unforeseen things that can go on. And likewise, in the second bullet where it says, notify the clerk, board president, or committee chair in advance if you're not able to attend a meeting. I don't know how other people on the board feel about this, but I am really struggling with the fact that we have doubled the workload for all the board members. Now we're all on 2 committees instead of 1 committee, and I'm finding it very hard to carve out time for meeting 2 different meetings plus the board meeting. It just is starting, it's getting to be a lot. So maybe if it said something like, make every effort to, you know, communicate with the superintendent or the district clerk or whatever if you can't be at something, because sometimes things happen and I can't be there.
Trish, I think if you go up to, before you get to those bullets, so I brought up, we talked about that in policy, and I had some of the same concerns, and the way we softened that was, what was the word? The original wording was the Board of Education agrees to, which means you will. And so we changed it to aspires to, this is what we hope for. So we felt like that softened all of those things to make them amenable to us. I don't know if you caught that. Just so you know that we...
Is that in the introduction? Where is that,
So it
Kevin?
says board meeting norms, including committee meetings, the Board of Education aspires to. And that's for every one of them. It says we aspire to. This is what we hope to do. And so that sort of, yeah, we changed that word for all those things.
Oh, I see.
So it was previously agrees to, which we thought, that's what we thought was too harsh.
Actually,
So-
Kevin, I think my original wording was the Board of Education will.
Something, either way,
So,
it's very,
It was
that's
definitely
very,
softened.
that's more like a must, which, that's one of the things that concerned me, and we talked about that at committee as well. We softened it all with the aspires to, and I felt like that kind of, I guess, I feel like if you might not have caught it, but if you know that's what we talked about and did, that may help assuage some of your concerns with some of the wording.
Okay. Well,
And you're
it
right,
just feels
Peter.
like if we're adopting something, and two, you know, that doesn't address the one concern that I have about the board president will speak on
Yes.
behalf
Yeah,
of the
you're
board,
right.
because
I do agree with
I just don't feel like I'm comfortable with that.
We
you,
can,
as long as
so-
we've agreed as a
Yes.
consensus.
So
That makes
should this go
sense.
back to the policy committee with the changes, or, I mean, it does, it'd be next meeting, you know?
If you would prefer, if the board would prefer to table this item, we can send that back to the policy committee and soften some of that language.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Motion to table it?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to table the approval of the board norms for some softening of some language. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Trish, for your input on that. That's exactly what we should be doing, is looking at these things and making changes as we see fit. Okay, next is approval to continue the regionalization process.
So move.
Do we have a second? We have a motion and a second. Are there any questions or comments?
So as long as we know that there's an out clause, or that there's an out that we can document, it's gonna be okay, I guess, to explore.
As we've stated previously, I would hope that the superintendent would represent the district and our taxing boundary and our students in the best interest of that boundary and interest, and I figure you will. I've worked with you before. And I also would hope that we push the efforts of the regionalization process towards the BOCES sharing model as much as we possibly can. I mean, we could be open to, there could be a benefit that we can't see and we don't know about. So I don't want to close the door on that, but I would hope that we would push the majority of it towards the BOCES, the existing BOCES model of sharing for things that districts can't do for themselves, afford to do for themselves. So I would agree to it with those stipulations.
Okay, what I asked was, the superintendent of BOCES is retiring, and so that would be toward the end of when this regionalization is probably going to come to fruition. It will probably be another superintendent who would be implementing it. And for that reason, I have concerns, because I don't know what the politics of this new person will be. I really trust Tom Burns, and I think he has great integrity, but because I don't know who will be the next person, for that reason, I have a concern.
I have plenty of concerns. My main concern is that you can read in black and white the regulation in the New York State Register, which now clearly gives districts an opportunity to elect not to participate in the regionalization plan discussion. I would feel an awful lot better if the regulation said something to the same effect, that on the back end, when the regionalization plan is complete, you have the option to not participate for whatever the reason may be. It's pretty clear in the frequently asked questions on the state ed website. It's pretty clear in the memo from Mr. Madison from state ed that we've all had access to. It points to that we have the opportunity to not implement things that we don't agree with, but it's not in the regulation, and that's my main cause for concern. I think there's an awful lot of good that can come from these conversations. there was no reason to rush it along. This is the kind of conversation that should be happening over a several year period of time, not, you know, several months. So I'm still struggling with whether I'm in agreement with going forward or not. I guess it's going to be a game time decision for me.
I've viewed this topic, I've been fairly quiet on this topic because I just felt I haven't had enough information. So I've really spent this time to read as much as I can and think. And so I've viewed this with a couple different lenses. So the first lens I viewed it was as a state taxpayer. I applaud and appreciate the state's effort in maximizing their efficiency and use of our tax dollars, 100%. Through another lens, as our responsibility as Massena Central School District board members to our students in our community right here behind us. So what is this regionalization process going to look like, and how does it affect us as a district and a community? So I've looked at it through that lens. And then the third lens I viewed it as is through my professional role in my community and regional involvement. And I find it conflicting that I've always been an advocate, and I've said this for many years, that that we need to continue to work together as a region, as a North Country. If you've ever thought about it, if you've ever gone on vacation and you say, where are you from? It's often the North Country or St. Lawrence County or a pinpoint, right? But when we look at the things going on in our region, we look at economic development projects, we look at business development, we look at local government. When we're looking to grow and develop, we do it on a community basis, on a Massena or a Potsdam or whatever your satellite towns are. And so I thought about this and I said, this is an opportunity for us with impressionable young youth, because this has been a generational cycle of this. Everyone's trying to vie for their own best community within the North Country. So I've really thought about this as an opportunity to say, if we have the capability to maximize our services and help those around, and it makes sense, and we can entertain and continue that plan to see what it looks like, I think that we're setting a really good example for the impressionable youth who are in front of us in saying, we want to be the leaders in regionalization and working to expand that partnership and that advocacy for growing the North Country. Because as a Massena community, business owners here and different employers, we don't employ just kids who graduate from Massena. We employ kids who graduate from Potsdam and who graduate from Norwood and Brazier and Ogdensburg. People come to Massena and still work, right? So if we can continue to help expand that educational services, it comes back in its full capacity back into our own community as well too. So that's what I've really thought about in kind of this regionalization process, and how can we not only expand for our students, but really as a region, because it does come back as an asset to us.
I said I appreciate your comments, and I've thought a lot of the same things, and I've said this previously, that the state, the intent of regionalization, I understand it, and if it's going to do good things for students, I appreciate it, but I feel as though I agree with a lot of what Paul says. This is where I'm sort of conflicted, because a lot of me agrees with Paul's stance, and I agree with the language, and it scares me. But I feel like if you boil it down, the system that we operate in is, you talked about the North Country, but we all have our taxing districts, school districts within the North Country. I love that idea, and I agree we should all respect the North Country and be proud to be from the North Country. But we were elected in the certain boundary that represents the Massena taxation district. So as a board member, I feel we have to represent that to the best of our ability. In wanting to participate in a broader discussion, I feel like we should continue, with the caveat that Mr. Burke represents the best interest of every dollar that we've chosen to tax within our taxing district for the benefit of our students. And the best way to do that at all times is through the BOCES model. It's already established, it already exists, and it's a known quantity with no weird language. You know exactly what you're getting when you get into it. You can opt out of it. We sign up for every service at BOCES. We have the ability through BOCES, the BOCES sharing model, to advocate that BOCES create a program, take away a program, change a program, and that's where I think we should leverage our efforts. That's the best regionalization model to use. We can't change the fact that this process was put in motion, and I didn't like anything about how it was done, but I see your side of it, I see your side of it, and the best way I could see going forward to protect that idea, which I agree with, to set a good example, and Paul's stance of, I can't stand that language, we can protect it through the way that Mr. Burke approaches the convenings with the other superintendents. Massena is the biggest school in the North Country. We will lead by example, and hopefully the rest will follow. And I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the same concerns shared by other boards. There are other districts throughout the county who need any kind of buoyancy they can get because of the transcript gap across the county. They can't help that. We can't help that. It's the world we're in. It's the county we're in. So, I mean, I wanted to consider those things as well. We were elected within this boundary. That's our only concern. Statewide people are elected to a different boundary. You know, so if you look at, keep your focus there, that's where I feel it should be. And I hope I articulated that correctly, but, you know.
We have a motion and a second to approve Mr. Burke's and our district's involvement in the regionalization process. Are there any other questions, concerns, comments? Anyone else have anything to say?
I do have another thing to say. So something that Trish's concern over the appointment of the district superintendent, the impending retirement and subsequent appointment of the next district superintendent. Every district votes on board members. In our case, we have a BOCES board member who happens to be the president of the BOCES board. I think all districts have a larger voice in what they realize with respect to the decisions that are made at BOCES. And you need to consider the democratic process and understand all the different layers that exist within the county. And are we leveraging our voice? Are we being represented by those BOCES board members? That's something that is really come to light with me. I'm not saying they don't represent us or think about us, but we don't always have conversations with them. And I think this sort of exposes that gap. And I would hope that hopefully some of them realize that, or we all realize that. Maybe you go to a BOCES board meeting and express your concerns. Those are open meetings as well. So those are other options because we have those voting powers within the BOCES as well. So that's something to consider. I don't know what the process is going to be for the appointment of the next district superintendent, but it is a concern and it's something to think about. This brings all that into a higher and more open light. So I hope that these messages get out, and that these are very tough decisions. We're put into a position. Don't commit or commit, but if you commit, you're in all the way, and you don't know what you're getting into. That's a very strange thing. And who would ever sign that? What would your lawyer tell you? So, I mean, we didn't ask for it, but that's what we've got. So, anyway, sorry about that.
When's the next BOCES meeting?
January.
Be the week before our meeting, right?
6th, maybe? January 6th, I think. Could be. I'm just guessing. I think.
It's on a Thursday, though, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can find out.
Okay.
So just something to think about. I mean.
That's good.
Any other comments? We have a motion and a second. All in favor of continuing the regionalization process?
And we also have time to get out because we have until January 9th.
No, January
15th.
15th.
15 to send a letter.
We don't have a, this is,
That's the last meeting.
this is our shot. Yep.
We can
Okay.
call a special meeting if any of the situations change, or we can always do that, so.
Okay.
Again, I ask all in favor of continuing the regionalization process planning. All those opposed? Any abstentions? How'd we do? Okay, good, okay. Okay, moving on. Thank you for the discussion, folks. Approval of the New York Power Authority Local Government Task Force representatives.
So move.
Second.
Any comments or questions? Thank you, Mr. Paretta, for agreeing to have more fun with that group.
Another meeting.
All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Approval of the 2025-26, how did we get, 2026. 25-26 school budget calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Comments or questions? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Approval of the crossing guard agreement.
So move.
Second.
Any comments or questions? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay. We have a resolution for a paid administrative leave.
So move.
Do I have a second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor? Any opposed? And lastly, approval of the personnel action items from Superintendent Burke.
And I recommend approval of the actions listed in items 1 through 68 on the personnel.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Moving on, any items for new business? This would be future agenda items. We must still have a list from prior meetings to get to.
Right.
Just as a reminder, at the next meeting, we plan on having Mr. Oliver here, as well as a representative from SUNY Canton to talk about some of those programs that we're jointly working on. So that should be a good evening.
Sounds like an interesting presentation and discussion. We have no public or press here. We have a couple of administrators. Thank you for hanging in there with us. I would love to call for a holiday adjournment.
So move.
Second.
All in favor? I'm sure everyone's against that. Have a happy holiday, everybody. We'll see you back in January.
Hey, New York State, did they did, I think, in the fall. Red.